Alright, so what's going on, guys? So if you've been following along with my channel, you know that I'm in the process of rebuilding my Galant that spun a rod bearing. So in my last couple of videos, we pretty much got the engine ready to be dropped. We pulled the bumper and the crash bar and painted the intercooler as well. But in this video, we're actually going to start off working on the new block, and the first thing we're going to do to it is a balance shaft delete. Now your balance shafts are the base of these two weighted, Now your balance shafts are just these two weighted rods that are in the front and the back of your engine, and they spin in opposite directions to counterbalance the natural vibrations that occur in an engine. And the reason you might want to delete these is simple. Your rear one is actually powered by a small belt, which is known to failing. And when that belt fails, it can take out the timing belt as well as several other things. So it's just a little extra insurance to save yourself a lot of headache over a small belt breaking. Alright guys, so I've got this about ready to come out. But before I get this completely out, because all I have to do now is remove the two mounts that are on the side, I want to start working on this one right here. So of course I already looked it over at the junkyard and I thought everything looked pretty good. Looking at it here, what you want to inspect is the actual cylinder bores. So you look down in the bores, you want to look for any scratches or any gouges. There shouldn't be anything that you can catch your nail on. Of course you're going to be able to see something, but you probably won't be able to feel it, so that's natural. Of course, we look at the top of it, you see you have some residue from the head gasket. We're going to have to remove that. The same thing over here on the side where the water pump was, and it is probably going to be the same thing over here with the oil pump. So there's one thing I did want to show you guys is this belt right here. So this is one of your balance shaft belts. Your balance shafts actually run inside of these tubes here, right? And they just counteract the vibration that would occur through, normal engine operation. But I'll get into that on another day. But for now, this belt is notorious for breaking, and then when it breaks, a lot of times it can take out your timing belt as well and just mess everything up. And if we look at it, like you can see, it's pretty worn. Like I said, so who knows how long this thing was really gonna last. So I did mention when I was pulling this that you want to check for compression, and you really want to feel for it and listen for it. So how we're gonna do that, or how I'm gonna do that, is by using this 1/2" wrench. If this is damaged for whatever reason, or you don't have a 1/2", a 22mm socket, which I would imagine would be in a 1/2" anyway, will fit over the outside of this. So what we're gonna do is put the end of our ratchet in that hole, and then we're gonna start to turn the engine over manually. And if you can hear that, you can actually hear the compression. There should be some tension on the ratchet. Now you don't want to do that too much with the engine being dry, but yeah, so everything looks and feels and sounds good. One thing I did notice is how much cleaner this engine is, or this block is, compared to the one that's in the car. So if we look at the one inside the car, you see it's rusted. It's more brown than anything. It looks pretty rough. But this one still has like its factory coating on it. You can actually read on the block where it says, 4G64, then some numbers. But if you look at it, this is all rusted. You can't see that. This block just looks like it's in much better shape. And this is an 02, so assuming this is the original block, this shouldn't be that much newer, if any, than the one that we have over there. So now if you're looking at the back of the engine, we have your oil pressure sensor and your knock sensor. Now again, if you have a Galant, you're not going to have this here. It's just an empty hole, but you can just thread it in there once you do the wiring harness conversion. So now we're just going to start scraping away at this. You want the razor blade to be as flat as possible. You don't want to dig into the block itself. And it's really just as simple as that. The big thing is just keep the razor blade flat, because you don't want to dig into this block and cause a gouge. All right, so I worked on this for a few minutes. You're still going to have some discoloration from the gasket, because we are going to work a little bit on the side. So it's similar to what we had going on up top, but you're going to need a razor blade, and we're going to scrape away this old gasket for the water pump. Now this is, I think, a paper gasket, so it looks like it should come off in chunks like that. So that won't be that difficult to get off, but we will need to get it all the way around it, or we're going to have a water leak. So now we're going to take this oil pump off, and to do that we basically want to remove all the 12mm bolts that are on this case here. So So keep in mind that the block is separate and it's aluminum piece on the outside. So we're gonna begin by taking off all the 12mm bolts that we can see. We'll take the timing tensioner off. This pulley just slides off. This is your trigger wheel, your trigger plate. This is what your crank position sensor actually reads. And to oversimplify it, it basically works by reading when this metal blade is passing or when there's a gap. And it sends that information to the ECU, and that's how it tells where the crank is. So we're gonna take this off as well. It does have a notch in it, so you know when to put this back on. All right, so now we're gonna get rid of some of these 12s. Go ahead and remove this. Get this belt out of here. And like I mentioned, guys, you can see this belt is pretty well worn. It's probably the original belt. Most people forget about this when they do like the timing belt, when they have the timing belt changed. So if you look at it, this could really go at any time. I'm gonna pull this. That notch corresponds with this little raised area on the nose of the crank, and of course this is the end of the crank. And that comes right off. So there should be a bolt behind this castle nut. It's gonna be kind of hard to see because it is coated in oil. And this bolt actually is gonna hold in your balance shaft. The same thing with this bolt right here behind this pulley. So getting this castle nut off is a lot like getting to your fuel pump, getting that ring off. We just need a flathead and a mallet, and we're just gonna put it on one of the edges and just tap it. So now you can get a better look at exactly what I was talking about. I'm just gonna wedge a screwdriver right here. All right, so now that bolt is out. I can pull this pulley back off. All right, so now with that pulley out, the oil pan does have to come off for you to get this out. That what was holding it on was the pickup tube on the bottom, because now once you take it off, the whole thing comes out as one piece, including the pickup tube. So that's why the oil pan has to come off. So what we have in here is going to be our front balance shaft. You can just pull this out. And this is really all this is. It's just a big hunk of metal. The same thing up here. Your rear balance shaft. We'll pull that out. Now I've only had one engine that I removed the balance shafts from, and I can say it wasn't really that noticeable. But there will be some added vibration. I am going to clean this up as best as possible. You see we have bits of gasket because we want these surfaces to be nice and clean before we put our new stuff on there. All right, guys, so I'm done with the razor blade. I got the big chunks of gasket off of the top here and on the sides. So what I'm going to use next is actually a gray scuff pad, Scotch-Brite pad. It's their ultra fine pad, and some acetone. And of course, I'm not going to pour the acetone on the block itself. I'm just going to pour it on the pad, and we're just going to wipe this down. Now, I am wearing gloves. You really should have like some latex gloves or something when you do this, just to protect your hands. But I actually don't have any at the moment, so these are going to have to do. You don't want to push very hard, or really at all. You're just kind of letting the pad do the work with the weight of your hand, and just going back and forth to remove any more of that residue. And as you can see here, it's already taken a lot of it off. It's like these marks are already noticeably lighter. Now you can also use brake cleaner for this too. So you guys get the idea. I'm not going to sit here and make you watch me clean the top of this block, but just take your time, use very light pressure with this, and let the acetone and the pad do the work, and we can remove the majority of this residue left from the old head gasket. Like, all right guys, so we're done with that, at least for now. It looks pretty good. You can see it made a huge difference, and I would be perfectly happy with putting a new head gasket, in the cylinder head back on this surface. I also did the side here where the oil and water pump goes, so that looks a lot better. Is we're actually going to move back over to our front case here. All right guys, so you already saw me remove your balance shafts, and what they are these two like foot long chunks of like cast iron or whatever these are made out of, that spin in opposite directions and help eliminate some of the vibration. Now I already showed you one reason why you might want to get rid of them, because that belt can fail and take out things with it. And even if it doesn't, only having the one shaft spinning is going to cause a lot of vibration and probably destroy the engine shortly after that belt were to snap. So all we need to do to prep the block for the balance shaft, of course, is remove the front case and take the balance shafts out. There's a bearing inside of here. So inside this bearing, you see a little hole here, and that is to allow oil to come through and oil the balance shaft. Now, about halfway down around in here, there's another one, and that has the same thing. So what we're gonna need to do is pop both of those out and then turn them. And it's that simple. So if you can get these out without damaging them, you can reuse your factory bearings, because all we're trying to do is block off that hole. Now you do want to keep in mind it is possible and actually pretty easy to damage these when you try to get them out. So I went ahead and purchased a balance shaft delete kit that came with new bearings, just in case I can't get these out in one piece. So what comes in that kit is a little plug, and this is going to go on your oil pump or your front case, whatever you want to call it. And this is going to block off where the gear was to the balance shaft. And then what we have here is a stubby balance shaft. So these came from like the early Mirages that didn't have balance shafts. This piece is about 2 inches long, and it's going to replace the balance shaft on the back side of this gear here. Also in the kit, we have these 3 bearings, and they're actually 2 different sizes. So this one, I believe this is the front one for the rear balance shaft. It's a little bit more narrow than the other 2. So as I mentioned, all we're going to do is knock that one out, probably 180 degrees from the hole that's in the block. That way we know it's blocked off and we don't have to worry about this moving. Not that they will. And we're going to do the same thing for the one that's a little bit further in. And that will eliminate our balance shafts, the need for a belt, and a few other pieces. And just give us some peace of mind when we're revving this thing higher than it was intended to. So now, of course, the matter at hand is getting these old bearings out. Now, how are we going to do that? So what we're going to use for this is a 32mm socket. You want to use an impact because, of course, the impact sockets are a little bit thicker than your chrome ones. And once you get it started, it is pretty easy because the socket will seat itself. If you bought the same kit that I did, it's going to come with new bearings, but you can get this kit without the bearings. So in that case, you would want to be extra careful with this. But again, do yourself a favor, just get the kit with the bearings. All right, so the bearing is out, but I'm actually going to need to flip the block over and get my magnet to pull that out. So now the tough part about this is you got to get it into this little hole so I can pull it out. But then it comes right out. So fortunately, I did get this out in one piece, and it doesn't look like I damaged it at all. So I can actually use this later if I need to. So now I think I forgot to record it, which is fine because I don't think you would have been able to see it anyway. We're going to use a long extension with a chrome 32mm socket because this rear bearing is actually slightly smaller than the one in the front. Now your extension doesn't need to be this long, but it does need to have some good length on it because you're going to need to get halfway down in the block. So now we're going to use our magnet tool and try to fish this thing out of here. All right, so it seems like the most difficult part about this balance shaft delete is getting this rear bearing out. You really had to fish it. The hole that you had to pull it through was kind of tight. I had to bring in some needle nose that have a 90-degree angle on them to help me get a good grip on it. But I do want to show you guys one more thing. So this front bearing is thinner than the one in the rear, if you can see that difference there. And while I was working on that, I was kind of thinking to myself, they gave you 3 bearings in the kit, but you don't need 3. Because for the bearing that is on the front of the case, it's not oiled by the block. You don't need to take that one out. You only need to take the ones, the 2 bearings out for the one in the rear. The bearing in the front doesn't even have a little oil hole in it. So you only need the 2 bearings. So the third one, I guess, is a spare they gave me because they like my channel so much. So thank you guys at STM for that. I appreciate the support. But now I'm going to go ahead and knock these bearings back in here. So as I'm looking at the bearings getting ready to install the new ones, I told you guys about how the factory one has this seam in it. It doesn't look like the new one has that seam, so you don't have to worry about it popping off. So the one thing that is important here when you're reinstalling these is you want to install the back one first and then do the front one. So obviously this is a tight fit down there, so you're gonna need to use your magnet tool to help you line this bearing up. So it looks like the holes in the block are on either side, facing out. So I'm gonna put this in here with this hole facing up. All right, so it looks like I've got it lined up. All right, so I've got both bearings in. I do want to point out just one more time to take note of the hole location in this bearing. You see I have it facing toward the top of the block. And it's the same in the back. You want to make sure that this hole doesn't get anywhere close to lining up with that other one, because that will cause problems with your oil pressure down the road. For this front one, you also want to make sure it's seated just below the surface of the block, because you don't want it to interfere with the front case when you go to put the oil pump back on.